Welcome to the Times of Israel's What Matters Now, a weekly podcast diving into one issue facing Israel and the Jewish world right now. I'm your host, Deputy Editor Amanda Borschel-Dan, joined by producer at Israel Story, Mitch Ginsburg, who is also our former military correspondent. So, Mitch, it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, wonderful to talk to you too. Thanks so much.
It is. And we are going to kind of do the time warp today, and we're going to look back at pre-revolution Iran from a very different angle. Now, Israel Story released an episode called Frankly, My Dear. That was the name of it, right, Mitch?
Yep.
That dove into a really crazy story of how fallow deer found themselves transported just before the revolution in Iran from Iran to Israel. And that episode, like all the Israel Story episodes, is beautifully curated, beautifully scored. It's sensual, it's sensory, it's an amazing adventure to listen to this. But we're going to take some of the material that wasn't in the episode and dive into that here. So all of that and more when we're back.
3 million Israelis are dealing with trauma since October 7th. To help Israelis heal, Hadassah is there, with the largest rehabilitation center in Jerusalem, world-renowned medical centers, and youth villages. It's said, saving a life saves the world. Imagine helping millions. This is Hadassah, a life-changing force in Israel and the world.
And we're back. I am Amanda Borschel-Dan here with producer at Israel Story, Mitch Ginsburg. Mitch, just very briefly, in order to dive into the material that was left out of your episode, we need to understand what was your episode. So to begin with, set the scene for us. Where are we? When are we?
Well, where should I start? It starts really with one guy. It starts with a man named Avram Yofer, who was one of these generals that the Israeli army, by the way, seems to no longer produce, but a real maverick, sort of like he was close friends with Ali Sharon. He was much in the same mold. And even when he actually was appointed to head the Israel Nature and Parks Authority while he was still in uniform, he was a general. And on the side, he was also running all of our nature reserves. And
and I should point out something I learned from your episode, that he was the man who instituted the "don't pick the wildflowers" policy. And I think, having military backing to that policy probably helped it succeed, right?
Yeah. I don't think he was the man who thought of it, but he was the man who made it happen. Yeah, sort of. And his real mishagas, besides the wildflowers, which I think was somebody else's mishagas, so to speak, was the Bible and the animals of the Bible. And his mission was to restore all of the animals of the Bible. And so the episode, like the setting for the episode, is the beginning of the revolution in Iran. We start on New Year's Eve at around close to midnight, so almost on the cusp of January of 1978.
Right, and the speaker you have speaking is a voice that was, immediately familiar to me, and it's President Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I was happy when I found that audio because, first of all, he has such a distinctive style and slow Southern delivery, but also here he had met with the Shah many times. It seems they were really close. And, the Shah was the sort of dynastic rule in power, very friendly with the West, very friendly with the U.S., very friendly with Israel. And he makes this toast where he says his wife really wanted to come to Iran, and he's in Tehran on New Year's Eve. It's the place the president of the United States chose to go. And he toasts the Shah as being sort of like a beacon of stability in a region that's roiling with turmoil. And it's ironic because he makes that toast in 1978, and by the following year, the Shah is out of power.
Right. And of course, current events are somewhat playing out we don't really know what's going to happen. And so that's one of the reasons why we're taking a deep dive into the past this week and setting a little bit of the background of what's happening again. History obviously repeats itself. But as you mentioned, during that period, Israel and Iran had ties. There was an Israeli ambassador in Iran. And so in order to get the deer out of Iran, we needed to employ not just the ambassador, but also some, special ops. And so included in the special ops is another character in this cadre of characters that made this happen, who is actually left behind. So tell us a little bit about what happened here.
Okay. So all the people who were involved in this were sort of friendly with and loyal to Avram Yofer. And one of them happened to be a former paratrooper who had served under him, who was the military attache, the last military attache, it seems, or at least for now, in Iran. There was a big embassy. It was very active. Trade was in the billions of dollars, arms. I think he told me 1.5 billion. I don't know the figure, but a lot. And he had a lot on his hands, a lot going on. And in the middle of all that, a lot, he also dealt with the deer, which is part of the story that you'll hear if you listen to the episode, and I hope you do.
Not if, when.
When, thank you. Now, so Mike gets sent into Iran, and that is all in the episode. He manages, whatever he does. I'll leave it some suspense. But later on, the Shah leaves Iran on January 16, 1979. There's like a great clip of, the news where they say, for a vacation from which he may never return. It's like one of these old school newscasters. And it isn't clear exactly what's coming next. At the time, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khoumeini is in a suburb of Paris, a place called Neuf-le-Château. He's living there. Also, ironically, he's being helped by people with a really much more Western orientation. They are not Islamists. They're helping him get his messages out of France or Paris and into Iran because they detest the Shah for his corrupt regime and for the military, the intelligence services, the Savak, and they're working in tandem, which was very unfortunate and very ironic. But these were people who were educated in the West. They did not want what we have had for the last, decades, which is this Islamic rule. At any rate, that's on January 16th. On February 1st, the Ayatollah triumphantly returns to Iran. He's greeted by millions of people. The streets are just alive with like elation. And still, I feel it isn't entirely clear to everybody what sort of regime is going to be replacing the Shah. Although it's very clear, I think, to the Ayatollah and his supporters, but it isn't to many others. And the Israelis remain behind. They have an embassy. And in the embassy is our friend, the military attache, Brigadier General Itzik Segev, the ambassador, Har Malin, who, by the way, is a former head of the Shin Bet, a Mossad man, a man by the name of Mordechai Ben Porat, who later was very much involved in bringing Jews. He earlier had brought Jews out of Iraq. He himself is a Jew from Iraq, and he was later a minister in one of Begin's governments, and he was there as well, and security guards. Altogether, there are 33 people. And on February 10, so the Ayatollah comes back February 1, February 10, he seizes power. And that's the day that the Islamic Republic marks the beginning of the formation of their new regime, their new republic. And still the Israelis remain behind. I don't know why. I really don't know why. Begin is in office then. And on February 11th, General Segev tells me, this didn't make it in the episode, but on February 11th, he goes to the embassy. There's the security guards there, and he hears this enormous cracking sound that he thought was ice in the river, because there's a river in Tehran that gets very cold, and he thought it was like ice being cleft into. And it isn't. It's 25,000 or 20,000, he said 25, protesters being led by PLO operatives who charged the embassy. And
wow.
Yeah, and so Segev...
By PLO operatives? Yes. Palestine Liberation?
I'm going to circle back to that in 1 second. They go up to the roof. He tells me this completely nonchalant. It's the funniest. He's 86 or 87 today. I spoke with him in Ramat Gan, and he's like, so we go up to the roof and we go with the usual plan, which entails a plank of wood and he lays the wood across the rooftops, and the embassy staff escape from the embassy over the rooftops and split up into 3 groups. And he leads a group of about 8. He and the Mossad man and around 7 other people go to his apartment to regroup. Meanwhile...
Wait, Mitch. Okay. So they take a plank of wood on the roof and they put it between the 2 rooftops of the adjacent building, and the whole entire 30 plus people of the embassy walk out, leave the embassy by this plank of wood and escape in this manner?
I don't know if all 33 were in the embassy at that time, but those who were in the embassy escaped over the plank of wood and continued across rooftops.
Already crazy.
And only just the very beginning of what they went through in the next 10 days.
Amazing.
So,
okay, please continue.
Okay, so the embassy, just by the way, historically it's interesting, it is taken over that day. It is renamed that day as the Embassy of Palestine. The streets is renamed as Palestine Street. And I think the next day Yasser Arafat himself shows up and sort of tacks the new plaque on the door that it's the Palestinian embassy. And there's incredible footage of him on the balcony of what was just the day before the Israeli embassy, and crowds outside, and they're all yelling Arafat, Khoumeini, Khoumeini, Arafat, like that. And it's also disturbing because it's kind of like that's what they envision is taking over. It felt to me like here, it's so symbolic. Like this was once a piece of Israel abroad, and now it's a piece of Palestine. So, and meanwhile, so they're holed up in Segev's apartment. Now, I should say that a lot of Segev's troubles in the next 10 days revolve around food. He's very, very intent on eating well during these 10 days when he's on the lam. There's no way for them to get out of the country now. The airport, which once used to welcome El Al flights, no longer does. And they're trying to figure out, what are they going to do? So he tells, according to what he tells me, he tells the Mossad man, he says, listen, we can't stay in my apartment. They know my address. We have to go to a safe house. But the Mossad man, he says no, first lunch, then safe house. So they sit to lunch.
Priorities, right?
Priorities. They sit to lunch. Segev says, I put 2 guys on the window so that they'll scout out. And sure enough, within minutes, 2 jeeps show up. And it's the Revolutionary Guard. These are people who are now loyal to Khoumeini. And it's clear they're coming up to his apartment to search his apartment. So they're armed. Segev says, listen, if they come in the door, we kill them. And we'll proceed from there, because otherwise they'll kill us. So they're waiting by the door, and he watches through the peephole or whatever. And he says he recognizes the commander as somebody who used to be in the army. He was the military attache who was loyal to Israel, but now he's working, of course, for the new bosses. And he says, I don't know if it's because my wife taught his wife how to cook, but I think that's the reason. At any rate, he leads the troops to the 3rd floor rather than the 2nd floor where his apartment is. And they go up, they go down, they make a show of it, and they don't stop in his apartment. 5 minutes later, or 2 minutes later, the landlord knocks on the door. And he's carrying 2 buckets filled with water and mops. And Segev says, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I thought that they came and killed you, and I just laid down a new parquet, and I didn't want it filled with blood. I was going to mop. So he says, no. And they leave, and they go to a safe house. End of the beginning of the day, the beginning of their journey. Should I continue with more? Because there's a lot more.
Of course you should continue with more, but we'll do it after a break.
What if prayer doesn't work? This question strikes us as a distinctly modern one, an outgrowth of the slow disenchantment of the world. But in truth, the question is an old one, and one given space to breathe here.
Welcome to Thoughts and Prayers. I'm your host, Jessica Fisher. Join me on a deep exploration of the relationship between religion and modernity through personal stories, classical texts, and conversations with leading rabbis, scholars, and educators.
You're almost not supposed to be doing this interview.
Our prayers accumulate on God's doorstep, piled outside like an unimaginably tall stack of letters. We cannot give up on the relationship because God doesn't come to the door as quickly as we may like. So let's keep knocking. Perhaps the gates of compassion will be opened.
Join us every week on Thoughts and Prayers, wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with Israel Story producer Mitch Ginsburg. So we're talking about material that did not make it into the fantabulous, fabulous episode, Frankly, My Dear, from the Israel Story, which we are going to include a link to, and in our audio version, include the entire episode too. And I just want to continue because this is such a cliffhanger for the material that didn't make it in, which could be its own episode, obviously. So much drama. So we have just finished lunch on the first day of running away from the new revolutionary Israel, the new revolutionary Iran, the Islamic Republic, the newly minted Islamic Republic. And we've gone to a safe house. So where do we go from there, Mitch?
Okay, so I don't want to skip any of the stations because there were a few, but okay, so they have they're split up into 3 safe houses. The Israeli delegation, I think they have sat phones, and they're trying to figure out how do they get out of Iran. And Segev tells me he's speaking with the chief of staff of the army at the time, Hilton, and Raful's coming up with all these Khoumeini plans, and they're using kind of like code language, mentioning old operations they once did together, where he's telling him, make it to like the Great Salt Desert of Iran, which is really far from Tehran, and we'll land a plane there. And Segev's explaining to him, listen, that's nice, except for every single officer that I used to work with in the military is being hanged. Like he says 500 people a day are being hanged. There's just scaffolding everywhere, executions everywhere, people being shot in the streets. He's like, I don't think we're going to make it to the Great Salt Desert alive. And classic Israel, they're trying to think what to do, improvise something. And Segev says he's in the habit every day of going out. Only he can go out because he's sort of short, Mizrahi, and he wears what he calls a revolutionary jacket. He says, I'm the only one who can go out and about and not be immediately identified as a foreigner. And the ambassador, he told me repeatedly, was 2 meters tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, doesn't go out. So each day he would go out, he'd look at the newspaper and he'd see who had been killed. And it was everybody who he knew, all of the, the top rank of many of whom he was really friendly with. They tried to escape. They were killed. So again, with food, he decides that his plan is he's going to go out. And the person in the safe house asks him to get vegetables because he says they have meat, but they need vegetables. So he goes to the bazaar and he speaks Farsi, I guess, quite well. And he starts to order, and he tells me he orders, I get 2 boxes of this, 2 boxes of tomato, 2 boxes eggplant, 2 boxes this, and asks the guy how much it costs. The guy gives him a number, and Segev pays. And then he says to him, well, you're not Iranian. Like, he wouldn't just pay like that. Where are you from? And Segev says, oh, don't worry about where I'm from. Don't worry. So he says, what do you mean, don't worry? And as soon as he says that, the door opens, and a Revolutionary Guard officer comes out. He's like the commander of the bazaar area. He takes him a step aside. He says, who are you? Where are you from? So Segev says to him, I'm from a special country. I don't want to get into it. So he says, I demand to know where you're from. What do you mean? So he says, I can't tell you here in front of these guys from the bazaar. Come to the side. I'll tell you. And he tells me his plan is I'll find a place where I can run away. He says, I'm paratrooper. I'm very fast. He's looking, but there's nowhere to run away because the bazaar is not that easy to, I guess it has like long lanes and it's not easy to run away. And so
a regular shuk in the Mideast is packed full of people and very narrow alleys. So it sounds a little difficult to run away. Yeah.
Exactly. So he realizes that's not an option. And I love his audacity here. He takes the guy, away from that shop. And the guy says to him, who are you? Where are you from? So he says, listen.
I mean, the problem with now, of course, Mitch, is that we're not seeing what's happening because there's no internet. And so Iran is a black box.
The part that I love the most,
Amanda,
is he doesn't say, I'm a small little peon in the PLO. He says, I'm the commander. like, be careful when you talk to me. I'm the commander. So he tells him, I'm the commander of PLO forces here. He says to him, you are? I was with the PLO because all the Revolutionary Guards, they trained outside of Iran. So he said to him, I trained with the PLO. I was in Syria with them. So Segev says to him, Syria? I was Lebanon. So he says, he says, Lebanon, really? Can we speak Arabic? Now, Segev, who's an amazing character, obviously, has like perfect Arabic. His parents were from Morocco, and he himself later went on to serve as Ehud Barak's personal envoy to Yasser Arafat. He met with him dozens of times in private. So he says, you want Arabic? No problem, Arabic. And he speaks to him in Arabic. And then the Revolutionary Guard officer leads him back to the stand of the bazaar. He says to him, this man is a friend of the revolution. Don't take any money from him. So Segev says, so I took the vegetables, I never come back. So he makes it back to the safe house, but there's still no way out of Iran. And that's the end of chapter 2 of their escape. This is like around February, I think, 16. And the streets are bedlam. There's gunfire everywhere, scores settling in the worst possible way. I mean, it's like, we see what we're seeing now. And then it was just this, it was everywhere.
I mean, the problem with now, of course, Mitch, is that we're not seeing what's happening because there's no internet. And so Iran is a black box right now. And so it's quite possible that what we see in another week or two will be very similar to what you're describing. And my feeling is that it is. Indeed.
Yeah. I mean, he just says it was awful. In fact, he's still in touch, amazingly, with some of these, non-Jewish Iranian generals, their children, some of the people who he knew who were killed. He has close ties with one guy, one very senior general's daughter. She came to Israel a few times. But anyway, it's awful. And they're speaking daily between themselves and with Israel. And one time he's on the phone with Ezel Weizmann, who was then the defense minister in Israel. And Ezel says to him, listen, I spoke with the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America. They're sending 2 Pan Am or 3 Pan Am jumbo jets tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to Tehran to take out most of their staff. There's spots for all of you. All you have to do is get to the Hilton and you're out of there with them. So Segev says to me, he thinks get to the Hilton is no problem, but okay, I'll try to get to the Hilton. He says, for me, it's okay. It's okay. So they each leave their safe houses. They make it to the Hilton. And at the entrance, there's a dais, of course, where there's these officers of the new Islamic Republic. And they're shaking down the Americans, also stealing their car keys, stealing their watches. But the Americans are allowed to go up into rooms, and the Israelis go through the security check. And the ones who pass go and sit in the lobby. There's nowhere for them to go. But 3 or 4 of them don't pass. Okay. And they're taken by the guards, and they're going to be executed. It's clear that that's where they're going. They're found as being loyal, having been loyal to the Shah, and everyone who was loyal to the Shah is killed. So Segev tells me, the ambassador says to him, Segev, you need to handle this. This is you. Like, you got to make sure this doesn't happen. So he's waiting for his moment in the lobby. And all of a sudden, he says all the doors open of the hotel, like 7 doors. And this Ayatollah Beheshti, who is an Ayatollah who he says was the person who actually ran the uprising. Like, he says Khoumeini was more of a figurehead, but this was the man who really, right? And he comes in, people are carrying his dress, like he calls it his dress, like his train from behind of his robes. And he says, I'm just going to go right up to him. And he takes a guy who's an Iranian who's on staff of the Israeli embassy. He says, you come with me, because he says, I speak Farsi, but this is much more formal. I need your help. He stands in the way of the Ayatollah. As he's approaching him, by the way, the guy who he takes with him passes out, faints on the lobby floor. And he says to him, look, he says, I know first aid from my time officer in the power troop, but I don't want to, I can't do him now. First aid, I leave him on the floor. He goes up to the Beheshti. He goes up to Ayatollah Beheshti, and he says to him, I want to present my credentials to the new regime as the Israeli military attache, which is, of course, insane. But and the guy says to him, and the Ayatollah says to him, I don't want. He says in Farsi, like, don't want. And then he says to him, what do you want, sir? And he says, I want you to leave. So Segev says, great. We're here to go. We just need our people back. And Then he says the guy who had fainted revives himself and starts like kissing the Ayatollah. He says in his stomach, he says that's some kind of gesture of respect. I have no idea. He manages to pen a letter. The Ayatollah writes a note that says, please to release these people. And they're restored to the Israeli delegation. He said they already had parted from their family. They'd left him notes. They were sure it was the end. They come back to the Israeli delegation. What do they do immediately? Eat. So they go,
it is such that joke, right? Like they tried to kill us. They didn't succeed.
Exactly.
Let's eat.
Yeah, I didn't think of it, but yes. So he orders the most lavish feast, this kind of special dish in Iran, palau balu, he calls it. I don't know what it is. It's some lavish, incredible meal that takes hours to prepare. And he describes this scene at night. I guess it's on the 18th already, or the 17th at night, February 17th. And he says it's 3 a.m. when it's ready. The entire delegation is back together. They're sitting there having dinner. He says just gunshots pouring out of every window, and they're in there feasting in like a downstairs dining room. And then the last leg of this, if I can still, do I have time for the last leg?
Please.
Okay. So
Of course.
the last leg is in the morning, they're meant to go to the airport. And on the way to the airport, they talk to the American military attache there, and they say the Israelis can't go together on one bus of Israelis. It's too dangerous. We need to be split among all of your buses. And he says, yeah, of course. In the morning, he says there's 18 buses or something like that, of fancy, big, beautiful American buses, and one rickety minibus for the Israelis. It turns out they're on their own. And they're discussing if they should get into it or not. Segev says, never mind, get in the bus. They're going to, anyway, the crowds are going to attack these American buses. But he runs into the lobby or around the neighborhood, and he takes these posters of the Ayatollah and all kinds of pro-Islamic Republic posters, and he tacks them on the bus so they look like they're a bus of supporters of the new regime. And he says all the other buses got stoned or whatever. They went to the airport with this. They were singing songs as if they were supporters of the new regime. And they make it to the airport. 6 hours, grueling, going through security checks and what have you. They get on the plane to Germany. When they're finally out of Iranian airspace and Turkish airspace, they report back to the Israeli Ministry of Defense. Apparently in Israel, at the foreign ministry, they'd already issued some sort of letter saying that the chances of these people coming back alive is almost nil.
Wow.
Yeah. And they make it out. He said, he's so funny. He says, the Americans, they land in Germany. The American general comes on. He says, we have showers for you here and rest for you here and snacks for you here. He says, at the end, an Israeli pilot comes. He says, everybody from Israel come with me. They come, they fly to Israel. The landing gear doesn't come down on the way. They run around. They manage to fix that too. They land. And then he tells me that he ends his story, Segev, by telling me that he there's a car waiting for him at the airport. And they take him. He says, Raful Eitan wants to hear the whole story from you. He goes straight to the Kiryat, to the Israeli army headquarters in Tel Aviv. And he tells him the story. And then he says, Ezo Weizmann, the defense minister, tells me, you did such a good job. I have a special present for you. You appointed governor of Gaza. So he said, that was my reward for this. I got to be the next governor of Gaza.
Wow.
And
wow.
That's pretty much where the story ends.
Wow. Okay. Mitch, I can't believe this was left out of the episode, but the episode on its own is, of course, a finely polished gem, like all Israel Story episodes are. This just sounds like a feature film. It's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this with me, and you've really blown my mind. No other words, really blown my mind.
Cool. All right, yeah, please listen about the deer. That was not the deer. That was just Segev.
That was not the deer.
Segev's incredible, too. All right.
Amazing. Okay, so those of you who are listening on the audio episode will hear immediately the full entire Israel Story episode. Those of you watching on video, there will be a link in our program notes to it. So please do check out Frankly, My Dear from Israel Story. Mitch, always a pleasure, perhaps even more so today, but now you have to top it next time.
I'll try. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's What Matters Now. Please check out another installment next week. This episode was produced by Ari Schlacht. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next week, shalom.